We'll start with the Conservative leadership race, where 6 candidates have just over 2 weeks left to sell memberships. They will also convene in Laval on May 25th for the French language leadership debate. Earlier, we caught up with Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown, one of those candidates. He's in Vancouver. Hi, Mr. Brown. Good to have you on our program.
My pleasure.
Thanks very much for making the time. I do want to start on the tragic news out of Buffalo, the mass shooting that took place there over the weekend. You tweeted out a denouncement of one of the organizers of the trucker convoy in this country, Pat King, who had also, like the shooter, expressed support for the white replacement theory. You called on your rival, Pierre Poilievre, to do the same. He did, and then he said, for Patrick Brown to use this atrocity is sleazy even for him. Is he right? Were you using what happened in Buffalo for political gain?
Listen, the white replacement theory is vile, and that's not where the party should be growing support. And in corners like that of the country, where there may be individuals like Pat King, who Pierre Poilievre has met with before, who has expressed support for before. I don't believe that's where the party needs to grow. I believe we need to be a big tent, multi-faith, multicultural Conservative party that will fight for all Canadians. And I make no bones about calling out that type of hate.
So I just want to be clear about why you singled out Poilievre. I take your point on denouncing the hate and denouncing the theory completely. But obviously we are in the middle of a race. Pierre Poilievre is one of your rivals. Are you saying that he was endorsing this view at some point? He was endorsing Pat King specifically? Do you have evidence that bears that out?
Well, listen, I don't think this is a theory that Pierre Poilievre supports. I think, unfortunately, he's been trying to grow support from supporters of Pat King very clearly. When he's out there meeting and showing support for Pat King, whether it's more recently with the events in Ottawa or before that, he has tried to cater to Pat King's supporters. And I just don't believe the Conservative Party should be going anywhere near that. And we should call out hate and ugliness like that without reservation. And it shouldn't take a candidate like myself challenging Pierre Poilievre to do it. He should do it automatically.
Respectfully, I mean, I listened to all his comments throughout the trucker convoy, and they in many ways mirrored the ones that you've made, insofar as he said, I support the sentiment behind the protests, and then eventually, not right away, I would be fair to point out, but eventually said, I denounce the illegal blockades that are taking place. I don't recall you being extremely vocal in the first week of the protest saying there's racism associated with this. I denounce it. I denounce the organizers. You have said you denounce the illegal blockades, and you said you support the sentiment behind those who came to protest where it relates to mandates. So what really is the difference?
So Vashi, I've had a long history of calling out hate throughout my political career. As you know, when we had the Islamophobia debate in the country, I was the only Conservative leader to support the motion that was put forward. The same motion was put forward in the provincial legislature, and I condemned it. I said, hate is hate is hate. Pierre Poilievre was out there meeting with Pat King. I wasn't. There's no comparison. I would never meet with people like Pat King who espouse hate, and the fact that he recorded himself pushing this vile white replacement theory, the same manifesto that was adhered to by the Buffalo shooter. This is a cancer within our society that needs to be exposed. We can't have politicians playing political footsie with it.
I guess that first of all, are you sure he met with Pat King? I just want to make sure of that, because I know that he met with organizers. I know that he met with people associated with the protests. I just want to be sure.
Yeah, there's a video on the internet of it.
Okay. Okay. I take your point then, and I'm going to move on to a couple of other subjects and just sort of helping our viewers understand what the party would look like under your leadership. Over the weekend, you were asked about social conservatism and what kind of place in an interview they would have in a party led by you. You said there's a place for all Conservatives in the Conservative family. However, in your book that you published following your leadership of the Ontario PC Party, you said, I would say to Ford, referring to the now Premier, that the social conservatives are dinosaurs who are becoming less and less relevant every single day. Which is it? So
listen, social conservatives have a place in our family. You can have a broad spectrum of views. And there was prominent social conservatives who were nominated under my watch as leader of the Ontario Conservative Party, like Will Bouma or Sam Osteroff, to give you two examples. Having said that, I've been very clear. My brand of conservatism is less government in your business, less taxes, less red tape, less government in your personal life. Who you love or what you want to wear is none of government's business. I'll continue to advocate that brand of conservatism. And I've been very clear, these divisive social issues where some candidates refuse to take a stand, I've been clear. Any government I lead will not be revisiting them.
So you don't believe that social conservatives are dinosaurs?
So maybe that's the wrong choice of words, but what I would say is they have a place in our political family, and I have a record of nominating prominent social conservatives when I was leader of the Ontario Conservative Party. But my brand of conservatism is less government in your business, less government in your personal life, and that's the type of government I would lead.
I understand that point. I guess I wonder if how you would address social conservatives in the party who have a hard time reconciling. And again, I recognize that you said, hey, it might not be the right choice of words, but it was a pretty succinct statement. Social conservatives are dinosaurs who are becoming less and less relevant every single day. What you tell social conservatives in your party about how they should reconcile that statement with the idea that you are now saying they have a place in a party under you.
So listen, I always believe that you can find common ground within the conservative family. And I'll give you an example. I have been fighting for religious freedom across the country. And, I was one of the first public servants and politicians to stand up against Bill 21 in Quebec, which infringes religious freedom. It's not just the fact you can't wear a turban or a hijab in Quebec and be a government worker. You can't wear a cross either. At the same time in Brampton, as mayor of Brampton, the cancel culture on faith I stood up against. You couldn't say Merry Christmas on a transit bus before I got elected mayor. You couldn't put that sign up, and I changed that. I'm a big supporter of faith communities. I think faith communities are a blessing to our country. But I draw a line at some of the issues, whether it is conversion therapy or abortion or same-sex marriage. Those are not issues that I'm going to revisit, and I've been clear about that.
Your opponents, though, are trying to characterize you, and I know you'll be familiar with this now because of the statement you made over the weekend. And then, right away, your opponents are saying, hey, take a look at this thing that Patrick Brown said in his book, which is diametrically opposed to the message he's putting out right now. They're trying to characterize you as someone who is flip-flopping on issues like that. And it's something, if I think back to the last election, opponents of Aaron O'Toole were able to successfully do as well, right? To pose it the idea to the public that you aren't someone who holds necessarily ideology because it's near and dear to you, but rather you go with the flow as to what will be politically advantageous to you. What do you say to that criticism?
No, well, Vashi, I'm an open book. For some candidates in this leadership race, like Pierre Poilievre, you can't pin down any of these issues. You can't tell whether he's pro-life or pro-choice or what his positions are on any of these issues that are important to social conservatives. I've been very clear, and so I appreciate Dr. Leslyn Lewis is very clear where she stands. I respect that. For me, I was the first Ontario Conservative leader to march in the Pride parades. I said at the time, love is love is love. You know what you're going to get with me. I am clearly going to run a government that will focus on getting Canada back on our feet, focusing on job creation, our economy, balanced budgets, stimulating small business growth. That's what you're going to get from a Patrick Brown government. And, there's, for me, all the candidates should state very clearly where they stand. I've stated where I stand. There'll be a place for social conservatives in the party. There are issues that they may want to bring up within a parliament that I would lead that frankly we may find concurrence on. I look at conscience rights for physicians. I look at fighting Bill 21 in Quebec, which infringes religious freedom, doing more when it comes to supporting adoptions. There are areas that you can find agreement, but I've been very clear on some of the issues that are on the forefront of social conservatives, that it's important to be upfront and state where you stand. And on the issue of protecting a woman's right to choose, I support a woman's right to choose, and my government will protect that.
In March of 2016, at the Ontario PC Party Convention, you said climate change is a fact, it is a threat, it is man-made. We have to do something about it, and that something includes putting a price on carbon. In 2019, in an interview with the National Observer, you said about introducing the carbon tax, I wanted Ontario to be on the right side of history. You also said, though, it was the beginning, you thought it was the beginning of your downfall as party leader. Are you now opposing or saying that you're going to rescind the carbon tax federally if you become leader because it's politically advantageous to do so? Not because you think it's the right thing to do?
Actually, I believe climate change is man-made and we have to do our part about that. Frankly, if I look at the Conservative Party, it was Brian Mulroney who negotiated the Acid Rain Treaty. It was Bill Davis who created the first Ministry of the Environment in Ontario. I don't think there's anything inconsistent with wanting to protect our environment and at the same time not necessarily endorsing Justin Trudeau's carbon tax. I think there are better ways to protect the environment, to do our part on climate change. In the party leaders debate, I said, yes, I would dismantle Justin Trudeau's carbon tax. I would respect provincial autonomy. We've got 10 provinces that have ambitious climate change plans. But I started a different conversation. And that conversation, Vashi, was right now you got China with 30% of the global emissions. You've got India with close to 7%. And right now they can dump product in Canada with no consequence. There's no carbon tariff at the border, and they can compete with Canadian small businesses, Canadian manufacturers who do have environmental regulations. And so there needs to be a conversation about where the emissions are coming from and how Canada can really challenge the growth in emissions we're seeing in the world.
And I do understand that point, and I certainly have questions about that, but that wasn't the substance of my question. You were arguing that the price on carbon was amounting to being on the right side of history, and now you're saying that you're going to rescind the very same thing. Again, to the point your opponents are making, there is no clarity on where you stand there. That's a complete reversal.
So no, Vashi, I said a number of years ago that climate change is man-made and we have to do our part about that. And I continue to say that today. What I'm saying, though, is that can be done with respecting provincial autonomy. There are 10 provinces right now that have ambitious climate change plans that range, even in Alberta, with different forms of carbon pricing. But, I just think Justin Trudeau has taken it to a level where he believes the only solution to climate change is new taxes. And I can tell you in Brampton, I have shown otherwise. In Brampton, we're going to be the first big city in Canada to have a fully electrified transit fleet, clean, green, zero emissions. And we're doing that without tax increases. And so I think technology can offer a lot. I think the different provincial plans speak to the reality is there are different dynamics in each province around the country. And I think having a government of Canada that respects provincial autonomy is not inconsistent with caring passionately about the environment.
The argument, though, that the federal government has put forward about the potential inconsistency there is that targets will not be met. I know you're going to tell me that the Liberals have yet to meet any of their national targets set, and I take that point, and I've questioned many Liberals about it, but let's put it aside for a second. Would you maintain those targets? What would the targets look like under a Patrick Brown government? Would they be to cut carbon-related pollution by 40 to 45% below 2005 levels by the end of the decade and net zero by 2050?
So listen, we're going to hit our 2050 targets, but you can't ignore the fact that the Liberals have never met a target. I'm not ignoring it.
I'm just asking you that. I'm not ignoring it. I mean that genuinely. I'm putting it aside because I hold Liberals to account about that. What I'm wondering is what target you will set. Okay, to the 2050 one. Will you maintain the targets by 2030?
Yes. Listen, I believe we can meet our targets, but right now we're not on pace to. Right now, the approach that this government has taken, we're not going to achieve our targets. And so obviously a more collaborative approach with the provinces, an approach that focuses more on technology, and frankly, having a broader conversation about where global emissions are coming from, that conversation is long overdue. And it's one of the reasons that I was bringing it up in the federal Conservative leadership debate.
Just really quickly, before I let you go, Mr. Brown, I know you're not going to tell me how many memberships you've sold. I know it's central to your strategy. The deadline is June 3rd. There have been some reports that the party itself might see 500,000 people, memberships sold total, 500,000 people voting in this leadership race. Does that number sound plausible or crazy to you?
So I'm not going to get into any hypotheticals of what the membership numbers may be. I will say I feel very optimistic that my leadership campaign has been successful in attracting tens of thousands of Canadians who may not have historically voted Conservative that we've been able to convince that their values are our values, Conservative values. And for anyone else who may want to join our movement to build the Big Tent Conservative Party, you still have time to do so at fighterleaderwinner.ca.
Tens of thousands of memberships?
I'm not going to give you a number. What I say, Vashi, is that it will exceed all expectations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.